go ahead, we'll change. No, you're good. I'm not going to
One of the really one of the great accomplishments of the work is in translating the graphic image into the storyline novel, enriched with ideas. But you talk about ideas largely in terms of graphic characteristics, in this interview and stuff. Do you ever reach a point as you're working with ideas that you want to go to prose rather than the graphic line?
It's easier for me to write essays like the essay I wrote about Richard Thompson's line, that just is coming out as the introduction to the collective cul-de-sac. And it actually, I don't have the same exact degree of torture with the writing part or the drawing part. I think that the drawing part is just a result of stubbornness. Like, as a kid, I decided I'd be a comics artist. Now I existentially can't really change course. So I just have to get good enough at it to be able to make it work. We concentrated on it because we both struggle in similar directions of making comics that people seem to be happy to receive, but feeling totally awkward about doing it. So the comic stuff, except for that first sketch where I don't care what it looks like, is difficult and remains difficult for me. Writing, I have, my daughter put it very well when she was younger. She just, you know, you're like an idiot savant, but with words instead of numbers. And like, I think I understand what she meant. You know, it comes relatively naturally to me. And so it does seem easier, and yet I know that there are other people who are true savants with words, and I can aspire to do that, but there's something I can do that I don't see anybody else able to do the same way, and that has to do with that the conflation and concentration of two different symbolic languages to make something happen. In a way different from the other people I admire. And even though it's harder than some of the other things, like, it's easier to make an illustration like a cover for a New Yorker than it is to make a bunch of comics panels that are actually working on a page. But that's where my design skills are useful in a different way than it's otherwise relatively easy to just design a graphic for a poster or a cover. Because there's a lot of different compositions, all of which have to go on one composition. And then the good thing about the language in comics is there's just no room for jive. You've got to get it down to a telegraphic or tweet length. And that means if you have to send 8 tweets, you do. But like, you really just don't keep just accreting language to get it. You have to like distill it down so it's sort of like these haikus that are appearing in balloons in terms of the essence of what it is. Like, I had to capture Vladek's language in mouse, but I couldn't reiterate his language because then every 2-inch high mouse would have a 20-inch high balloon. And so to capture, without understanding rationally the syntax and sound of his voice, but recompose it with decisions like, could he say go here rather than walk because it's 2 letters shorter, which will take an 1/8 of an inch less than the balloon? Were major decisions. And so I find that that particular use of my whatever language skills I have and whatever drawing skills I have, it's just the highest iteration. Oh, you do it.
About the person Jan.
You've mentioned that comics future is its past, and both of you are great anthologists. Could you kind of talk about, you know, the importance of looking at earlier artists?
Yes, I think the way I phrased it was the future of comics is in the past, so that people could take it any way they wanted. But for me, I can't imagine having, even though I talk about reinventing the wheel, I'm reinventing something that I have some kind of blueprint for, which is comics. People would never draw unless they'd seen other drawings. I don't know who got it started with what particular picture of a hunt or tracing of their hand back on a cave. But this is an accretion of approach that has, you know, when you look back on it, periods. Like, oh, everybody could actually draw representationally in the 18th century, even like frontier women. And the zeitgeist becomes clear when you look back at a given period of how people approached what it meant to draw, and one distills from that, learns from that, and sees all the ways it happens. Comics have a history. The reason I wanted to learn it is it's a short one. So it's a lot easier than learning the history of writing or whatever. And I don't know how to approach what I do, except for building on what it was, and even trying these things on. Like I'm saying, well, let's see, if George Herman was alive now and was trying to talk about his sexual difficulties, how would that come out? And that can be a premise that leads somewhere that has nothing to do with either Herman or sexual difficulties at the time, but it's part of the lens that's tried on to see what one can enter. Meanwhile, I now know that this is no longer true. I just like aged out. I think it's great that comics finally have a history, because in this last death throes or life throes of the book, libraries of the complete Peanuts, the complete Barnaby, the complete Crazy Cat, all of these things are happening. It used to be so hard to get this information. And that's urgent, because it really does allow a future to understand what actually was made. You don't have to totally stumble on blindly. But then, when I was at Angoulême, I had a second show, which was my private museum. Aside from my retrospective, I took over the town's museum, used their collection, Ohio State University's collection, a collection named Glenn Bray's and mine, to make my ideal museum of comics. It was to make the town and the festival work together, because they get along like Palestinians and Israelis. And it sort of worked, but I got my head blown off in the crossfire. And in that show, I couldn't believe the show wasn't going to travel around the world for the next 10 years. It was an amazing map of what happened. And so this young woman artist, who will remain unnamed, was a guest artist living in, on a grant from the museum and school, working there, and she was there during the Angoulême Festival. She was at some kind of reception I was at, and as we were talking, she's got a graphic novel out, and she's working on 2 or 3 more, and she doesn't realize that making comics was an unsavory activity. It's like, I make graphic novels. And like, at some point I'm talking about cartoonists. It was like what I did with you with Harvey Kurtzman, except I expect anybody who makes comics to know that name. It just seems, why, how could you not, you know? Picasso, remember him? In this case, I mentioned it, we went by, and I started explaining, I said, have you gone to that exhibit? Because it was up for a week before the festival. And I said, no, I'm here for a couple months, I guess I'll stop by. And then she said this thing that, like, I felt myself shrivel and die, which she said, like, you're really interested in that history stuff, huh? And it was sort of like, oh, you collect butterflies or bugs. And then, it was like this eccentricity that this old fart had that was like in her presence. And then I've been kind of mulling this ever since, like, how could she say that? And it's not like her work is incompetent, it's just, it does what it does. But then I asked another young cartoonist who is interested in history, Dashiell Shaw, who I was hanging out with, and I asked him, like, what's up with that shit? And then he explained it to me, and I now understand the present, at least abstractly, which is that it's a sampling culture, art. Everything's available. So she may well know who Harvey Kurtzman is without remembering his name. She may know who, I don't know, Jimmy Hatlow is, or Karen Dash, or whatever, but it's all present. So it's all just part of like a giant polluted pool that you dip into, take out whatever you can use at that moment. I'm not sure that that's so bad. It has nothing to do with the way the architecture of my brain is wired. I really have to understand something to be able to use it. So that's the answer to history.
Well, actually, just to piggyback on that, do you think you'd have been as passionate about comics if you were around today and this history was, if you were, just becoming a cartoonist today, and the history's just there in this pool, and it's not even history; it's just without context. Right? It's almost like
I would never become a cartoonist now. I'm sure of it. Part of it did have to do with exploring, secret cities that nobody knew. Like I go to libraries before they had microfilmed everything and thrown out the originals. Find Sunday comic sections from the teens, 20s, 30s, poured over it. It was like really exciting. There are very few books about comics. You'd see 3 panels or something. Go, that's weird. And I felt it was like a world able to be discovered and used, and that was the adventure. That was what kept me excited about all of this. I don't think it's possible if everything's just there for you, because then it's there for you. If you need it, you use it, and why would you need it? And making comics right now, I think I'd be more interested in how my computer actually works, rather than hoping it works when I get up in the morning and do something electronically, because it does seem interesting to manage it. I just got like one of those ducklings that's taken away from its mom and follows the lab-coated guy around. I just got imprinted with comics and just kept with it. But this, there's too much information is actually a problem, because it devalues all information. Like, I remember where I would travel for like 2 hours because some church was showing old Max Fleischer cartoons, and there might be one that I hadn't seen. And then when the boxed VHS set came out, I bought it, and I looked at 3 of them, and the rest of them are still wrapped in cellophane like 20 years later, because they're there as opposed to like, that's available. So although I feel like if Google customized its search for me, it would just build comics into it, and then I could look up whatever I needed to know, like Harold Washington comics, because I got that award, yeah. And then I do that as a regular way of searching, because I can see very limited filter that I use to understand the world.